It feels like I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah, man, it's been a while, eh?
When was the last time?
Probably at the Calgary convention 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
No, I think might have been the Winnipeg one because I haven't done the Calgary one.
That's right.
Yeah, where you ducked out early.
Yeah, I lasted for a day or something.
How you been coping, man?
I'm good. Like, I live on the countryside, and more interesting to me is like how you coping being in the big city.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's been okay. I think the first month of it was because you're so used to just like, well, I'm so used to just working and being able to obviously go out and do fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So just sitting down and doing nothing for so long has been pretty challenging.
Well,
But
it
I think
doesn't seem like you're sitting down and not doing anything.
No, I know. I mean, the last week I've definitely done lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think I spoke about this with a couple of other people. I think because normally, with tattooing, I normally start at 12 and then tattoo right up until like 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So, and generally I don't do too much in the morning. So I get up, get ready, go to work, come home and then draw.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my entire day done. Whereas now, even though I'm like posting stuff, that only takes like 2 hours of my day. So it still feels like I'm doing nothing,
Yeah. Like, how's the shop going and all that? Like, you must be super busy with.
Well, I mean, I'm not doing any of it. I'm just paying for it. So.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. So, like, I just got someone into because I'm useless at anything DIY or anything like that. So I just, I'm paying people to do it for me. And I guess it was quite scary to start with because I've got no way of paying them right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been super cool. They kind of, I guess they don't want to lose that contract, right? So they're not gonna put it on hold or anything.
Yeah.
So thankfully it's been okay. But yeah, let's stop talking about me because no one's here to see me.
Okay.
So I guess the first, when I first became aware of you, it was when someone started working at my shop and he had a few reference books, and one of them was, I think it was the Times of Grace one.
Okay.
How long ago was that when you put that
That's
out?
been ages ago.
Yeah.
I think Al put it together over the course of 2006, 2007-ish.
Okay.
And then, so like, like 13 years ago.
Well, I mean, it was probably a little bit after that because
2005.
Really?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, because I mean, I started tattooing in 2008, so it would have been.
Yeah.
But that book could have been around for a while, but it was just when I saw it, and that's when I became aware of it. So I obviously know who Al is, but did you want to explain who that is and what his company does?
When I was living and working in Germany, Al, who is originally from England, but lived in Nuremberg at the time in Germany, he was sort of like a door-to-door salesman for like tattoo flash and some tattoo supplies. And I got to know him that way and through like some of the earlier conventions in Germany.
Right.
And well, at the time, the shop that I was working at in Essen in Germany, Glaube Liebe Hoffnung, I was the lowest of the totem pole. Like I came in, Ilya and Tobias, they were like amazing at what they were doing, right?
Yeah.
So they had their clientele, and the only way for me to kind of like build stuff up was like painting my ass off, really.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. Like I basically did like decorate my station with stuff that I was super into at the time.
Yeah.
And when like you have like someone sitting there in the chair for something, and then they look at what you have on the wall and they pick something off there and be like, oh, someone must want that. And I'm like, no, like it's just painting. And then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I could see that as like a sleeve or something. And I think that way, like it was always super important for me to draw and paint. And then when Al came around to, you know, like sell stuff at the shop, at some point he approached me and be like, oh man, like you being busy putting stuff out there, would you mind, or like would you be interested in putting like a book together or something like that?
Yeah.
And I was very hesitant at the time, and it was actually my friend Pete, who later on I partnered up for a tattoo shop named Times of Grace,
Yeah.
a good friend of mine. And he kind of like put the whole thing in motion, saying like, you would be stupid to pass up on that chance. Like you would get so much
Especially at that,
exposure.
especially at that time as well, because there wasn't many people putting out things like that. You know, I think it was you. I think Sham had a book out around the time that I saw it, and a couple of other people. You know, there wasn't really anything like that about. I mean, obviously there is, but I guess in this sort of genre of tattooing, there was absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I think, yeah, I think it was so important to so many people's careers, especially mine. You can see it's still in my work now, like changing from what I was doing then, which was essentially new school, seeing that you could almost do realism, but in a tattooed way. What sort of stuff, you know, you spoke about you were tattooing and then people would see that kind of work. Was you doing just walk-in stuff, or was it still your kind of style before you?
Like, I started in like a very like sort of like traditional tattoo shop. Like we would do anything that would come through the door. So like a typical day could entail like a little bit of tribal. And I'm not talking about like cool blackwork stuff. I'm talking about like that kind of like early 2000s spaghetti tribal that is super not my kind of stuff anymore anyway. And like, I don't know, like a piece of kanji, some like a little traditional banger, like everything.
Yeah, just a normal shop.
So it was like that. And I think it was actually, again, like my friend Pete was playing in a band at the time, and he took me to see his band play, and we're just like at a show. And Germany is kind of funny when it like, or was back then, like a lot of people were like trying their hand on like the like San Francisco traditional, but with a lot of like a comic kind of influence on it. That makes like kind of like that new school kind of stuff that you were talking about. And then you're at a hardcore show and you see like lots of these kids with like really like bold statements tattooed on them, like the whole like death before dishonor, and it's like in a banner, hold like you'd see swallowed kind of things. And I was like, oh, that doesn't look right. And I think at that time I was like thinking about like how could I make it like look darker or something, like a more like a visual impact. And I was like, oh, that would be way cooler if that banner would be held by like two crows, for example. And that kind of like got the things in motion. And I do remember that I did a back piece around that time, like 2005-ish, of three crows chasing a dove, and that kind of was then published in a tattoo magazine, and kind of got the ball rolling for me, really.
Isn't that funny how like magazines then was such a huge influence, and now it's so difficult because the internet?
It's so funny when you talk about, or like watch like those kind of interviews that are floating about on the internet, or tattooers that have been around before the early 2000s talk about like how they were like desperate waiting for that one magazine to come out once a month, or
even
like
every
2 months or something. And then
and to be honest, I think that actually was the thing, because I mean I started in 2008, and from 2008 to quite a few years, magazines were still like, we would get a magazine a week from the local store, and that's the only way of seeing tattoos. And it's such a tiny like frame, such a tiny amount of time where Instagram happened, and suddenly magazines are just not a thing anymore. Like I can't remember the last time I picked up a magazine.
Yeah, it's like every time I'm at an airport these days, like I'm
Yeah.
like there's one about like I'm gonna have a quick flip through, but I mean like nothing really has changed. I think Mickey Violetto is still pretty far up when it comes to tattoo magazines, like having quality content, but
Absolutely.
a lot of the magazines are really like there's like I remember I would buy a magazine and then pick out my favorite designs or tattoos that were hand in or like an article on someone, and I would cut them out and put them in a little portfolio away so I could get rid of all the junk that was in
Amazing.
it. Like you end up having like a stack like this.
Yeah, the
and,
physical version of Instagram.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so much baggage. Holy shit.
Yeah, and that's in a convenient little phone.
Yes, it has changed so much. And I mean, like most people that I know, like nobody really has a portfolio anymore. It's just like when a customer comes to the shop, they either know who or why they want to get tattooed by someone.
Yeah.
Or if they're unsure, then I think a lot of people just go on Instagram and check out.
Well, it's the same. I find at conventions as well. Like most people don't have a physical portfolio. They either have their iPad set up or they have just the thing saying check out my Instagram.
Yeah.
But I think like it definitely, and I'm an advocate of the internet and digital stuff. But like there is something that's missed with having like something physical to look at. Like I definitely think I prefer looking through like a physical portfolio, or obviously painting like actual paintings are much nicer. I think
you did that.
What's that? Sorry.
When was the last time you did one like an actual painting?
Mate, I'm embarrassed to say it's probably 4 years ago.
Oh boy.
Yeah, a long time ago. But I mean, doing this quarantine has actually really, really made me want to start doing like proper paintings again.
That's the thing. Sorry for interrupting there.
No, of course, no.
Like, if there's anything good in this whole like coronavirus thing, it is the content that tattooers right now being paused with their like everyday careers and sort of like forced into, like go back to the drawing table and paint and draw and stuff like that. And it's like one of the guys that I used to work with on the regular when I was in Vancouver, Stace. He is a madman when it comes to painting. Like I feel like the guy puts out one like every 2 days kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's just that's Water Street Phantom on Instagram. If
that's correct.
His work. Yeah, he's phenomenal at everything he does.
Like the energy of that guy is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with Water Street Phantom, check him out.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah,
gonna have a good time with that.
And like a super unique take on everything.
Yeah, it's like
which is I think super important.
Horitomo and Aaron Kane had a laugh child.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So when did you Times of Grace, the studio? When did that come about, and how did that come about?
It was like, to me at the time, I had been at Globally Waffling for about 7, 8 years, and it was time for me to sort of like spread my wings and go my own way. And as I said earlier, like my friend Pete came with me and we partnered up, and we were like good friends to the day. And it was like I didn't have the shop for a long time, because then like I opened it with Pete in 2007 and I left Germany in 2010, 2009. Like I moved to Denmark from there. I had a chance to start working with Uncle Alan.
Legend
which
that is Uncle
has
Alan.
Been, what's that, sorry?
The legend that is Uncle Alan.
The legend, the man. That was a big change in my career as well. Like it was good to kind of like leave my early stomping grounds and go and reestablish myself somewhere completely new. But funny enough, it was like a thing where because at the same time, like the internet and like how tattooing was presented on the internet started to pick up. So it didn't feel like having to rebrand or re-establish myself as much. It
Yeah.
was slow for a little bit and then picked up right away, and I kind of felt the same. Same with like a few years later, I relocated to Brighton, England, and it was the
Yeah.
same thing. Like
Yeah. Well,
people
once,
got
yeah, as you said, once you have that following that's worldwide, it almost doesn't, you know, people that are lucky enough to have that following worldwide, you don't feel that. Like, similar to myself, like if I go and guest in an obscure place, I'm pretty lucky that I can already have customers there.
yeah.
So I think that's definitely one huge positive from Instagram. When it was funny actually when you just left Times of Grace, that was when we first met.
Yeah.
And
What an off
you,
chance.
well, I think you posted a cancellation, and then Becca,
No. It was actually Becca saying, like, I told Becca I got a cancellation being at her place. She was like, "Oh, that kid Anthony who really wants to get tattooed by you."
Yeah,
And
I've been
then
bugging her for so long.
came in, like, I think he must have been tattooing for like a year at the time.
Not long, yeah. I mean, it would have been, it would have been like even a few months, maybe a year.
Yeah.
But she messaged me, and I was actually doing my motorcycle license at the time, so I had my like helmet on, my gloves and boots, and then I saw a message from, yeah. I wasn't
Instant
like
fail.
but I was there waiting to go out, and yeah, I got a message from Becca, and she was like, "Eckel's got an appointment," and I was like, "Ah!" So she was like, "Yeah, message him," but I didn't have your contact details, like, you know, you weren't. It might have even been before Instagram. Yeah, it must have been. And so I messaged Times of Grace because I thought you were still at Times of Grace because you were doing a guest spot at Frisch Street.
That's right.
So I messaged Times of Grace, and I was like, "Hey, I think Eckel's got a cancellation. I really want to get tattooed." And then they just messaged back saying, "Yeah, he doesn't work here anymore." And I was like, and I was thinking, "Oh my God, like the cancellation's already gone," like panicking. And then I called Becca, and I was like, "Please tell him, let him know, and I want to do it." And I think maybe I don't know how we ended up figuring it out, but we did. And then this is when you did this little guy on my throat.
Yeah, so long ago.
I love it, mate. Yeah, that was you should have seen me, man. Like full motorcycle gear, panicking on my phone, trying to get an appointment with you.
Oh,
and this started this beautiful friendship, where every convention I decide to sing to you.
yeah, that was anyone who ever does a convention with Antony, you get annoyed by the man. But then on the flip side, when it comes to the after hour, when he's like puking out of the window of a driving cab, that kind of like pays you back for it.
Oh my! I want to tell that story because I think it's perhaps my most embarrassing moment ever, and I'm going to tell it from my point of view, and then if you want to cut in at any point and correct me.
You were drunk at the time. How valid can that point of view be?
Well, because I've been told by about 4 different people. So this is how I remember. I remember I got to Canada, I think it was just before I actually moved here. And everyone, and I've never taken drugs or anything like that. And then when I got to Canada, quite a few people smoked weed. And people were like, "Oh, you should try it. And I was like, "No, it's okay. Like, I've got to this age. I don't, you know, it's just I'm not interested in." And then we were at the after party at Winnipeg, and I got very, very drunk. And then there was a bong on the table, and at this point, I was coerced into trying some of it. And obviously, people that smoke weed know that mixing the two isn't a good idea. Anyway, so I tried it. It didn't really feel too bad, I guess. And then I guess that was when we all decided to go home, and we got in a cab. And halfway towards the hotel, I just felt obviously I was going to be sick. So I opened up the window, was sick all down the side. Then, from my point of view, I thought that was it and that was over and done with. But I remember going up to the hotel room, sleeping, and then waking up to a text from you saying, "How you doing, mate?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then you were like, "Do you remember sobbing last night?"
I forgot that bit.
And so I was apparently, according to you, Jay, and I believe Sam was in the car, I can't remember. Apparently I was being sick down the side of the car whilst crying. But yeah, I don't remember any of that.
I think walking you through like the lobby and the corridors of that hotel that we were staying at, and you sobbing, I think that was the funny kind of part of it. Just a memory to keep and cherishing.
Oh mate, I mean, whatever. And now I'm sober, so you know, there's a lesson to be learned there.
I always find that like I think I'm the worst person to be drunk around because I'm the one who is sober and doesn't forget the nonsense that you were doing.
But I love the way that you're always so cheeky about it. Like you're like, I remember you sitting at the convention and then just like leaning over and going, "Yeah, okay," just trying to wind me up. Like, yes, Eckel, I'm fine. But yeah, I think I mean, yeah, there's a ton of silly stories like that. But thankfully, yeah, I've decided it's probably not for the best, and yeah, I'm going to be with you now, mate, and sober and laughing at all the people making idiots of themselves.
Boy.
And I guess you haven't done a convention with me when I've not been drinking. That's going to be
the last one.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's been conversations being had here at home with my partner Chelsea. Now, like, we relocated about a year ago to like the countryside here in Canada. Like, we live on an island far away.
Yeah, aren't you like 7 hours away from an airport or something?
Well, 7 hours away from Vancouver.
Right. Okay.
It's a bit funny because it's really not that far of a physical distance. It's just like you have to kind of like take multiple ferries and whatnot.
Right. Got it.
And it's a change of pace. Like, our life has been a lot quieter. So we still come, like, I'm not out of the business. Like, I'm still coming to Vancouver to work. But it's for like a very compressed period of time each month.
Okay.
And then going back home, essentially. And now, since we're living more remote, there is more, you know, like when you live in the big city, you're kind of like taking a lot of the big city things for granted. Like, oh, you go for breakfast and you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
The place that we live in has it has a restaurant in like a marina or something, but it's, I don't know, we've not been there yet.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, like, so now whenever we get to Vancouver, it's like kind of like we work, we meet friends, we go to all our favorite eateries, and like it kind of gets an excitement going again. So at this point, to go back to our initial kind of conversation about conventions,
yeah,
it kind of feels more intriguing again to go and do a convention. And I would probably considering it and like booking myself super lightly.
Yeah.
Like, for those of you who don't know about this like ongoing convention joke and me, it's like I find like this whole like setup of a convention very overwhelming. Like, so much noise and there's like a million people and whatnot. And it's for the most part just not for me. And I ended up cutting quite a few conventions short because, like, on the one hand, there's a kind of like sentiment of like, oh, you want to be part of that. But then on the other end, like, I feel like I'm quite introverted in terms of like, I like my own like small space. And then you're out there and everything is like a crazy carnival. And yeah, like the last convention I did was 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago at the Winnipeg one. Right?
It was,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful convention. Rich who puts it together does an absolutely outstanding job. But I guess so, like it is a convention with like a ton of people, and
Yeah, it's still the same setup at the end of the day.
yeah, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, I want to say about like Rich and just any convention that is run by someone who cares about tattooing always seems to have that edge.
Yeah.
And I guess that's how I sort of choose my conventions now. If firstly, if I kind of know the person, like more than just person that owns the convention, like if I know them through tattooing or whatever, and I know that they actually care about us. And I think that's really important. It really, really shows. And I think Winnipeg is one of the last ones that, and because it's quite a new convention as well. I think it's only been running for 4 or 5
3
years.
years. Like,
Yeah. Oh, has it been? Oh, you did the first one, and that was it.
The barfing, crying one is the first one that you put on.
Is that what we're going to put on the promotion now? Oh dear. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's been running for 3 years, and
3 years.
yeah, it's one of my favourite ones that I've done really, especially with the pool party at the end, which you missed.
Oh yeah, that's not for me. Like lots of drunken tattooers in a pool. Oof.
It was, mate. I remember we got out of the pool at the end, and like when everyone got out and we'd kind of cleaned everything up, you could just see like a thin layer of like grease on top of the pool.
See, that's the reason.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yay.
So you've worked in you worked in Germany. Whereabouts in Germany were you?
Sort of like the Midwest nearby Cologne. Like
Okay.
anyone who has like an idea about Germany, and like Hamburg
Yeah.
in the north, Berlin in the east, kind of like east, and then that kind of like heavy industrial area in like the Midwest of Germany is where I'm from.
Okay, and then you moved to Copenhagen, then you moved to Brighton,
That's
and
correct.
now in Canada, Vancouver for a bit, and then wherever you are now.
Yeah, I started working in Vancouver in 2015.
Okay.
And yeah, like I became Canadian last year. So, yeah. Little
You still
flag.
need to work on the still need to work on the Canadian accent, though, mate.
Oh man, like I try so hard to get rid of my German accent, but there is no way. Like I will.
It adds to the mystique. I like it.
Yeah, this is good for you. I mean, like at this point, at least, it kind of is muffled enough that when I meet people, it's not like their first guess, like, oh, you're from Germany, or you're from Germany. It's mostly that people think like, oh, Scandinavian or something. And
Yeah, I had a customer that met you on holiday.
yeah, in Mexico.
Yeah,
Like
and she said, I met your friend. I think is he from France or where's he from? And I was like, he's from Germany. So I guess you're right. People don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a weird. Did you just come up to her and I guess recognized my tattoo?
Like I think it was like a little bit more than line work that she had on her back. And I recognized it as one of your pieces. So I want, like, that's not usually my thing, but like since you did it, I was just inquiring about it really.
Yeah. It was just really weird because she's not in the like tattoo industry at all. Like she's and she just like, oh yeah, I met your friend. Is his name Eckel? I was like, yeah, in Mexico. Okay, small world. But yeah, what I was going to ask you about the difference in like, have you found a difference in like clientele in terms of how people are in the different places? Because I definitely found a difference in Canada over where I was in England. Just in terms of how people will start a back piece. First of all, getting stuff, like huge stuff, just right off the bat. Like, I think in England, I probably did 6, 7 back pieces in my entire career. And then I came here and suddenly, I think I'm doing 8 just at the moment, with being here just over a year. And I just find that people in Canada, at least, they'll start a big piece and then they will come in every single 2 weeks until it's finished, which is perfect for a tattooer, obviously. I wondered if you'd noticed that as well, if it was just my experience.
So here's a funny story. I moved to Canada in 2014, but with like the rules and regulations, I came in sort of like on a, like I had a spousal visa going on, and I came in on a tour/spousal visa in the process to become a permanent resident. But because I applied from outside Canada, I was not allowed to legally work in Canada. So I was like,
Oh my God.
being in Canada and then going back home to Europe to work a bunch, and then like kind of flip-flopping for about a year.
Yeah.
And then I finally got approved to be a permanent resident. And at the time I started working at my friend Chad Woodley's shop, which was back then Sanitary Electric in Vancouver. And so I was super excited and be like, okay, Canada, I'm here making a big announcement. And my email inbox was crickets and tumbleweed. Like,
Really?
and I was like, oh shit, I had a year. It's like sort of like a yeah, I don't know, like a, what is it called? Like a year where it didn't work essentially. Aside from going back to Europe, and I was like, oh my God, I missed the boat. Like all of a sudden nobody knows about me or wants to get tattooed anymore. And I was really quiet for about 2 months. Like I made enough to get by and pay my rent and whatnot.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, like I got hammered with back pieces from like left, right, and center. And it really came down to once I announced being permanently in Vancouver, people were like, hey, I'm now saving up to get this show on the road. And then, like stuff happened fairly fast. And like people here are crazy dedicated. That's the thing as well.
As I said, that was the main thing that I noticed. It's just people, they want to get it done. They just want to make sure, because whenever I talk to someone about a back piece before going ahead, I'm like, this is a huge commitment, and you basically need to come in regularly, because I've got back pieces that I started like when I first started tattooing, and they're still not finished because people will, and through no fault of their own, like sometimes people lose their jobs and stuff affects them that way. But I just find here people will have either saved their money up and then just want to just have like a fun, I don't know, it just seems like, more dedicated and just come in all the time. It makes our job so much easier.
It's a good thing. I find to keep that momentum going as well. Like there is definitely something to be said about, like you start a back piece or like a big project. It doesn't have to be a back piece. Like several years ago, and the customer comes in once a year, you kind of lose that momentum, because like, let's face it, all of us progress. Like we change little things as we go, and then you are still going back to something that you did like 10 years ago, and you're like, oh, what was I thinking at the time?
How did you even approach that thing in your mind when you were drawing it? I also find when stuff is that, you leave it that long, you end up like looking at old stuff against the new stuff, and you're like, I need to touch that bit up, and I need to do this bit again, I need to reline that bit, and like it then doubles the amount of time you're tattooing them, because you keep going back doing old stuff from like 10 years ago.
And like there's also something to be said about, like you do a tattoo with the idea of creating a quality product that will last their customer's lifetime. But there is something to be said about if there's a piece of the tattoo already 10 years old and you add something like just new shading and coloring against line work that is 10 years old, you will end up redoing the lines. Like there is no way around that. And like a type 3 liner over 10 years looks more like a type 7. So stuff like that just makes life a little bit more difficult. And I definitely find, that's probably like for the people that are watching this right now, a more like technical kind of conversation to be had about how like these days, whenever it comes to a big project, I like everything just gets a gray line. Just getting it in, get the blueprint sketched onto the customer's skin, and then work it from there, like rebuilding lines and whatnot as I go. And I find it makes that kind of like having to match old lines a lot better. So it's a bit of a funny one, like when someone comes in for their first appointment and basically just leave the shop with like a scratchy, like rough outline.
I know.
But it's so much better.
I do the same, and I always feel bad because I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to redo this, but I think it makes it in the end quicker because I don't know, if you line something properly the first time with thick and thin lines, it takes so long because you're kind of, well, for me anyway, like I'm having to work out every single line as to which thickness I'm going to do it. Yeah. Whereas, and also then having to worry about like the stencil rubbing off and the customer not being able to sit for that long. Because obviously if you do an entire back piece properly, in terms of like, when I say properly, I mean the right line weights first time round.
Unless you James Tex, then you do the whole
well, he's an anomaly. We can't talk about him. But yeah, for normal people, you know, it's going to take me 8 hours to line a back piece. And that's such a, you know, a crazy thing for a customer to have to go through. So I think even just for time, like for people, well, for customers sitting there and actually getting tattooed, the grey lines are actually more easier for both of us, you know.
Yeah. And it's like you really get on with it. Like you just like there's like I kind of always do a little bit of a disclaimer beforehand. Like, you know, like there's a conversation to be had about that, like telling a customer like, oh, you're not going to go out with an outline of a big piece that you will impress your friends with. It just looks like scratchy little lines. However, I find most of my clients, they kind of like reach their pain threshold around the 3 to 4 hour mark. And then after that, it just becomes a fight against my client ability to cope with the tattoo. Yeah. So that's really what it comes down to. And like, I like people to be able to, you know, like not dread the next session, just like you kind of like stop the session at a point where it just becomes too unbearable for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, man. Like, I mean, I've had 2 tattoos recently. One of them, the first one I had done, was awful in terms of it hurt so bad. And I was like, I'm never getting tattooed again. And then, but the second one was really easy. And it made me think, oh, I need to get everything filled. I need to get all my gaps filled because I was like, oh, I can do it. It's easy. And I agree. Like if you scare a customer and they leave with that dread and that like absolute broken sort of feeling, chances are they don't want to come in again, you know, and it puts them off, and you know they end up rearranging or cancelling or whatever. But if they get to that point where it just starts to get too much, 10 minutes later, like, oh, that was easy. Like I sat there for 4 hours, no worries at all. And it makes them enthusiastic about going back and being like, oh yeah, I can do this easy. That was way easier than I thought it was. I think the key is not to break your customer because they're not coming back.
Like I also find like our industry is like ever changing, and I find over the course of the last few years there's a bunch of companies coming out with like some numbing ointments and whatnot, and I really don't subscribe to that. Like when I got my back redone a few years ago, I like the guy that I like, Chris Detmer, he's another tattooer from Germany, and I were kind of like experimenting a little bit with like what kind of numbing stuff can we use. And to be quite honest, the only thing that really worked for me was just like sitting through it and not doing anything. Like the whole like using EMLA or whatever is just getting you, like lowers you into false security for the first like 20 minutes. Yeah. That usually you would spend on your body, like getting that adrenaline going and
Yeah.
being able to kind of cope with it. And then like after those 20 minutes, it's like, bam, you get hit real hard and you are not having a good time.
Yeah.
The thing that I find over the course of the last about 3 years, that is definitely a big helper for a lot of my clients is just like over-the-counter muscle relaxer, like back pain muscle relaxer.
Yeah.
Just like I find quite honestly, like a lot of people battling with that like hysteria about like, oh, I'm getting tattooed and I don't want to sit through the pain. But if you have something that kind of calms you, that helps you through the whole like process.
Yeah, even if it's almost like a placebo effect, I find that if you think something's working, because I do the same. Like even though it probably doesn't work, but I always take like anti-inflammatory, like ibuprofen, just like 20 minutes before, and whether it works or not, I don't know. But I feel that every time if I get tattooed and I haven't taken that, I have a much worse time, and I don't know whether it's like my mind playing tricks on me or whatever, but you know, it still works. So I definitely agree with that. I also, going back to what you said about the numbing cream, I was tattooing a back piece a little while ago, and she was really struggling, and she sort of mentioned numbing cream. I said, well, you know, and I let her know my opinion on it, and saying I don't really like using it, but if it's something that you have to do, then of course, like we can try it.
Yeah.
And so next session she tried it, and exactly what you said, like first maybe half an hour she was amazing, and then suddenly just went. And I think that session we could only do like an hour, because the second half of it hit her, and she just couldn't, because that false sense of security, like, oh, this is easy, I can do this, and then suddenly it wears off and it's like 100 times worse. And then after that, she's like, I will never, ever use numbing cream again, because it's just ruined.
Funny stuff. Since we made fun of you barfing out of a cab earlier, I'm going to tell you a story. Like that was probably like 14 years ago. I got my ribs tattooed by Hennes in Germany. It was like one of the tattooers around the area that I'm from, like such a good tattooer. And at the time I was getting both of my ribs done kind of like on a like off week on week kind of situation, like kind of like just flip-flopping sides.
Yeah.
By the end of that, I was so over it and just made an ass out of myself. So it didn't sit well. And then at the time, I just started drinking. There was a brief period in my life where I was like, oh, like I should have a drink. And I talked to Hennes about this, and he was like, oh man, like you were drinking, you could like just come in, get tattooed, and while you get tattooed, you have a shot. You have to bear in mind, like at the time, and I mean like probably till today, I have like the mental experience of a 15-year-old when it comes to drinking. So I show up at a tattoo appointment and ask him like, oh, so how much, when are we going to start? Like, should I start drinking now? And he's like, oh, you have like 20 minutes. So I go over to the convenience store and get a bottle of Jaeger. And I kind of like picking out the bottle size. And I was like, oh, like one of those like little, like whatever, like that's not enough.
Yeah.
And I ended up with like one of those like bigger half-liter bottles. And I basically finished that bottle in like 20, 25 minutes. So by the time that I get on the bed, I'm already hammered. Tattoo was fine. The amount of an ass that I made out of myself afterwards, like Hennes locking up the shop and me holding onto a lantern pole, barfing my guts out. Like if you ever get around the convention, you see a sketchbook by Hennes, Gentleman's Tattoo Flash has it. There is a sketch of a swan, which is my back piece, and a tiny little like drunken sailor hugging a lantern post next to it. So here's my
that's amazing.
rewarding story.
Oh mate, I have to look out for that now. That's so cool.
And funny enough, I gave up drinking after that right away again. Like it was
amazing.
Not my thing.
Yeah. Oh my God, I mean, stories like that are so funny. But yeah, when you think back, like of all the times that you've done such stupid stuff, especially when and I mean, obviously my experience in Winnipeg, like, you are one of my biggest inspirations and someone that I do look up to a lot. So being an idiot next to you is one of the things where you think, oh man, like, it's just so embarrassing. You feel that little thing in your gut. You're just like, what am I doing?
But here's the thing, like you have to obviously understand that everyone who is in tattooing was a newbie at some point in their career.
Sure.
And they
Yeah.
probably made an ass out of themselves hardcore in front of someone that they look at. It's just the rite of passage.
Well, yeah, I definitely went through that the hard way.
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Well, I was going to talk about your time at Conspiracy.
Yeah.
Just because from kind of because at this point I still, even though we'd met and stuff, we didn't like know each other or anything like that. You tattooed me here, and then I think you tattooed my shin there, but we didn't really know each other. I was just like a customer at that point. I wanted to talk about how, yeah, got a meerkat on my shin from you. Hang on one sec. Your stream is. Hang on, your stream's paused. One sec. One sec, mate. Sorry. Oh my God. Right, I'm going to start this again, mate, because it's. Okay, are you there now?
I am.
Cool. Okay, it went really weird for a second. Yeah, sorry.
We have really poor internet connection. As I said, like we live in rural Canada.
Yeah, it's okay, man. Yeah, so yeah, you did that on my leg. And so I wanted to talk about you and Alan working in the same shop. And at that point in time, I feel like your paths crossed in terms of your work. And I think you started to come quite close together in your drawing style. And I just wondered if that was, if you know what kind of, how that happened, or, was that, it obviously wasn't a conscious thing. It just happens about like sort of being with someone for a long time. Just wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, like it is a funny one. I feel like I don't really subscribe to the whole like like you have a paint night after work every week or something, and like you critique your peers' work and vice versa. Like that's just not for me. I think if you work with people who genuinely their work you admire,
Yeah.
there will always be something that rubs off on you.
Yeah.
Like when I worked with Alan, it just what you explained, like that just happened. Like we kind of like both were influencing each other, and then that altered our course of like how we do things, and then both of us went our separate ways from there again and took whatever we had from that experience. But it's not like it's a funny kind of thing, like being inspired by someone else's stuff or blatantly ripping someone else off. Like there's like, for example, like, to just give you an example, like like that cheekbone thing that Grime does with all his skulls. Like I feel like whenever you see someone like whenever you see someone doing that like hook cheekbone thing, like you're like, got you there. I've seen that. Grime did that before you. Like that's just like you don't pick that one. Like not saying that Grime has one feature. Like that guy is a multifaceted person. Like picking a feature that is so standing out in someone's work and claiming that to be your style, that's not on. Like you can't.
Yeah, well, I find that quite strange in terms of like, I mean, here's another story, and it relates to, because I think that you are probably the most, what's the word, copied artist, really, in the modern sort of era of tattooing. And I know you're uncomfortable with sort of people saying that, but you are.
It's a bit of a weird one. I mean, like into account, like I think what I would say my shtick in tattooing is like I render images in the way that they appear in real life, but make them tattooable.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, so like I didn't invent what a raven looks like, but I have a certain like signature how I would bring that to paper or to
Well,
skin.
I mean, this wasn't the tangent I was going to go down, but I mean, we can talk about this now. In my opinion, and most other people's opinions, you were the first person to do what you just said. So like a realism, but a tattoo, making it simple enough, but still having correct proportions in there.
Yeah.
And it not being traditional, or I think anyway, I don't know really anyone else that was doing that. Like I know you've spoken about Chris Conn before, and him being a huge influence on your work.
Sure.
But yours was so far away from that. And
I think there's always something to, like, as I said earlier, like if you look at someone's work who inspires you, you will take something out of that. Like, let's go with like Chris Conn example.
yeah.
Like that kind of like storytelling aspect of his tattooing and like his amazing paintings is such an important kind of thing. And I find that interesting. Like when I lay out a tattoo, I quite often ask a client, this more personal for the client. Like, let's say if I ask then my customer, like, do you want to add like a little like symbol or number or letter with it? And they go with like, oh yeah, can you do like the number 3? So by incorporating that like tiny little detail into the design, it creates something that on the one hand looks quite nice, just like first impact. And then if you look at it more up closely and you're like picking out like little things, there's like a talking point. I don't like to give away things like right away, like here's the thing.
Right.
Quiz me about my tattoo. Like I want to create something that is nice to look at and add that little detail as a talking point later kind of thing. And I feel like Chris Conn is like perfect for that. Like he has like his stuff invites that kind of discussion. Like there's like the number 96 in a lot of his paintings that I believe is like a 96 Tears is like a song of a band.
Okay.
Like that it might have something to do with, I don't know, but like there is like that kind of like, oh, making an idea or a guess on what this could be about. So like stuff like that I find really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I remember talking to you about like talking about your customer sort of interaction and stuff. I remember you talking about a customer that asked for a certain tattoo next to, I think it was 2 hands, and she wanted something that sort of didn't match with the other tattoo, but the other tattoo was done by someone else. And I think that was a really interesting. That's something that I then sort of took on board and thought about a lot more. And you know, looking at the tattoos around it, and the person that is going on, and making sure the tattoo suits that person, because I think it is such an important aspect that people overlook all the time. Like even down to the simple fact, if there's like a blue rose here, don't put something that's going to like not work with it. I mean, I just wanted to maybe talk about that a little bit, because I think that's really important, and people seem to, they kind of think, this is my tattoo, it doesn't matter about anything else. I think it's really important to incorporate everything, not just the tattoos, but the person themselves, and like how the tattoo would suit that person.
I think it's like one of those things where like as an artist, you can do like doing art is like it's about you or like the message that you have. As a tattooist, you still you do something that is meant for another person, and like it's not graffiti. Like it's not like just bombing over someone else's work. It's like you want to create something that is well balanced and in the grand scheme of things looks good with the person. Like let's say someone is covered in black and gray tattoos and they just know that you're doing color tattoos. Like I would probably still try to, you know, like at least convince them, not convince them, but like entertain the idea of, hey, like, there's just black and gray tattoos. If I would do a color tattoo next to that, I will stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Like that kind of sentiment about it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, because I think obviously the person's got to live with it, right? And it's not, you don't you don't look at a person through an Instagram square just that tattoo. You see someone as they are, and I think it really is important that you need to just take into account other stuff. But, yeah,
I guess definitely agree with that.
What should we? I think I was going to take a couple of questions, if you're comfortable, just from people that are watching right now. So if anyone wants to ask questions, whack it in the comments now, and I'll ask Mr. Eckel. But let me. I was going to also ask about, because you've worked in. Whilst people are writing questions, I'll ask a few more questions of my own. You've worked in kind of studios with people, and then you'll go and work in a private studio, and then you kind of flip-flap. And I remember when I guested with you in Brighton, which was a private studio, and I remember you saying to me that you missed interaction with people. I just wanted to hear your kind of positives and negatives from like a studio with people and then working in a private studio.
I feel like looking back now, and having done all sorts of different setups, when you start off in a street shop and there's like always like quite a bit of banter going on and whatnot, like at some point, especially when you kind of like cross into that, like, oh, I'm doing more serious work in like commitment in terms of like you do bigger work and whatnot, you kind of want to have a more calm environment. So like I just don't want, I don't know, like being comfortable with my client and then one of the other comes around and makes like a comment or remark that is not suited for the situation. Like I don't like that a lot. And I feel when I was younger in tattooing, working out of a private studio, you always heard about like, oh, this guy is really good, or this lady is really good, and they work by themselves, and it's like that kind of like made it sound like, oh, this is the ivory tower of tattoo. And when I moved to Brighton, it was the first time I actually had a private studio just by myself, just like a little like hole on the second floor kind of thing. And I was like, I really liked the studio itself, but it was so quiet and quite lonely, to be honest. That, I mean, like there is like things, I don't know, like tattooing is a thing where there is like so many valuables coming at you at every different person. Like in terms of like, oh, like you have someone who had a day at the beach 2 days before they came in to get tattooed, and you do the stencil and like you give it one wipe and the fucking stencil comes off and you're like flying through the thing to kind of like make the line stick, and those are really exhausting days.
Sorry, just sorry to interrupt. The stream is actually going to cut off because they only let you do it for an hour. So what I'm going to do is just end it, and then I'll start it again, and then we'll carry on the conversation. So just give me 2 seconds, mate. Sorry, mate. I didn't want to cut you off, but it was gonna die. So.
Hi, Heather.
Yeah. So you were saying about working in a private studio in Brighton.
So in Brighton, I had this like finally being in that ivory town. I was like, this is not that great. Like if you have a bad day at work, or you just like too hard on yourself. You don't have anyone to kind of, you know, like go over, look at their tattoo, and you see that like little like shitty line that they did, and being like, oh, I just, like everybody, you know, like does suck at it.
Is that why you invited me to come and work so you could just go?
Oh,
like I need someone to pick me up. I see.
So then when I went back to work in Vancouver, I started off in a street shop, and even though it's a really good shop with like super nice people, I just didn't feel at home in that kind of scenario anymore.
Yeah.
Or at least not on like on the regular kind of thing. Like doing a guest spot in a busy place is fun, but it starts to exhaust me after a while. So
yeah. Well, I can imagine, because where we met in Frisch Street, I could imagine that must have been quite difficult, because that's probably the busiest shop I've ever been in. That place.
Can you imagine? Like, and I mean, like, it's such a crazy store in front. Like, you know, they pump out high quality work all the time, with like 6 of them working in a place that is smaller than a living room in a London flat.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's impressive. And I like the energy. Like, I think Danny definitely has a good thing going on there. But yeah, like, so I worked in a street shop in Vancouver for a little while and decided I would go back to a private studio. But I decided to do it a little bit different at the time by having a place that was bigger than the place in Brighton, that I could invite guest artists more often. And then that over the course of the 4 years that I had the place turned into a co-op with 4 other people. And it was fun. Like, that was, I think, in terms of a setup for a tattoo shop, that was my favorite so far.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I've worked in all different places, and I think that is my perfect, because, I mean, yeah, first 10 years of my career until I moved here, or no, 12 years, or wherever it was, 11, 12 years, 10 years, I don't know, whatever it was in World of Tattoos, which is obviously a street shop, and there is part of me that loves how hectic it can get, because it provides you with so many cool stories, right? But when it comes down to producing work and taking things, I mean, not more seriously, because I would always take things seriously, but having just a space that works creatively better. I think a private studio, but with a couple of people you kind of respect in there as well, to kind of bounce ideas off of, or, you know, maybe hear some critiques or ideas or whatnot. I think that seems to be my favourite thing as well, rather than, because I think I'd go mad if I worked on my own.
Yeah.
I'd have no one to sing to, so.
Say again, sorry?
I'd have no one to sing to.
Oh man, I don't even want to imagine how that would be working with you on a regular.
Mate, anyone that's ever worked with me for more than a week can tell you it's a nightmare.
Knows about your poor singing quality.
What? I've got a voice for an angel.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So before we got cut off, there was a few questions, and I did take note of them in mind. One of them talked about your sketchbooks, and perhaps if you've got anything that you're releasing, are you got anything in the works right now? Are you thinking about doing anything, or?
Yeah, like I'm actually going back to what I said earlier about the tattooing aspect of our careers being on hold right now due to this virus. Like, I myself also work on like a few little projects here. I have a couple commissions that I'm like sort of like puttering away at. I have a huge commitment to another book with Gentleman's.
Amazing.
That I'm working on at the moment. I mean, like, it's been a while since I had a big publication with Gentleman's, and Al has, you know, like every now and then gives me a nudge, me like, oh, when is the next thing coming? either in the middle of moving from one continent to the other, or move to the, like, there's always something up that I'm like, man, I just don't have the time in the day to sit down and do something that I'm stoked doing. But like having that like quietness right now, like I'm through like the first, like, I don't know, like 10 pages of the new sketchbook.
Amazing.
So there is something coming, and I'm actually quite happy about it, like, or at least excited about the path that this is taking.
I remember you once spoke about it, and I don't know if this is your process or if it's something you want to do, but you said when you do a sketchbook, you just concentrate on the sketchbook and you take time off of tattooing. Am I right in thinking that, or is that just something?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, like, funny enough, I think I have done a number of sketchbooks, but there is like 2 publications that were kind of like little milestones on the way. Okay. Being the Kingdom of Rain one and the 13. Those were the ones where actually like the other sketchbooks are just like pencil on scrap paper essentially, and just like putting them away as I go. Yeah. When I did those sketchbooks, they were like, okay, I use pencil crayons, like the Prismacolor ones, and they're a pest to work with. They're just tedious and time consuming, and I feel like every time I actually use those, I want to, you know, like make it a little bit like a drawing that is a little bit more fancy out of them. And yeah, like just because it's so time consuming, it just happened that I always did one of those sketchbooks when I was like in a state of movement, meaning like when I moved from Denmark to Brighton, before I had the private studio, I had like 3 months off of being just focusing on being at home and drawing. And that, like, having, I don't know, like I can't focus or concentrate on like 10 things at a time. Just having this one thing to work on is perfect. Like right now I'm working on a commission, not a commission, like a submission for an art show in Vancouver, while doing the sketchbook, and that's enough that I can handle.
Okay. What's the art show, if you don't mind me asking?
It's an art show that is put on by Alexis Thompson, who works at Gastown, and it's called Bloom. Gastown Tattoo Shop is like one of the big tattoo shops in Vancouver. It's a beautiful
huge
place.
As well.
Huge. So there's like 3,200 tattooers working there, and like all of them are doing, like, they're good people, and I like that lot. But yeah, like Alexis is she's super fun and like is a customer of mine, and like the last few times I always kind of like said like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna do one for the upcoming art show, and I end up not doing anything. So I feel like right now I have a bit of a, like, I really should get something done.
You got some time.
That show, due to the circumstances right now, is going to be an online show. Like, so you will see the works of art being shown on the Gastown Instagram, which is, I believe, Gastown Tattoo. If
you search it on Instagram, it will definitely come up.
So that's something that I'm working on aside from the sketchbook right now.
Amazing. Well, when it comes to like themes of your books and work and stuff, I mean, there's definitely a common theme surrounding death. It's super interesting, and I'm presuming there's more meaning to it than just death, you know, as a subject. Is it something that's personal to you that you find you put into your work, or you just think it's a cool subject? Well, not a cool subject, you know what I mean? An interesting subject.
I think it's, I don't know, like, I'm not a very religious kind of person.
Says the man who put a crucifix on my neck.
Yeah, that was it. It's just like, there is something about death that is like, it will, you know, like at some point in the future will strike each and every one of us. So like that's the inevitable. Like we're gonna die.
Yeah.
Like if it's gonna be peaceful at old age or in a car crash or whatever, we all have the same fate essentially. And I think that makes it really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, it just means everyone can relate to it as well, right?
Yeah, totally. Like everybody has experienced loss and grief and like how to deal with grief in their lives. And I think when not a lot of people know that, like I grew up with my grandparents, and when my grandpa passed away a few years back, that was like really like situation that had a big mark in my life in terms of like, I mean, like, if you think about like how much time we spend at a drawing table, working on a piece of paper or on an iPad or whatever, and at least with me, there's like a lot of failure with that. Like I spend time on a drawing for like a day and a half, and just to decide like I just nah, it's not going anywhere. So I rip it up, put it in the stove, and work on something else. But like having that, like it's time that we spend on those things. And when my grandpa passed away, it felt like that time was too valuable to spend on just doodling around. So it kind of like put me off drawing for a little while. And that was like probably one of the harder times in my career, just being like trying to make myself excited about drawing. And then from one day to the other, it kind of like clicked again and be like, hold on, this is a part of me. I really enjoy spending time on a drawing, and this is not a waste of time, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I got back into it, and like kind of started off by just like do a little doodle in from like before I would do a customer drawing or painting or whatever, and then just like amped up the excitement about it again.
Yeah,
but yeah, I
guess
think there is like kind of
sorry.
like excitement. Am I still there?
Oh yeah, it's just yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine. You're kind of blurry, but it's fine. I'm sure people can hear you still. So
Okay. Yeah, I think also the like death as a tattoo design has been floating about in tattoo shops since the dawn of time.
sure.
So it's a quite natural theme or topic to work with.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, and also the imagery does just lend itself well to
Yeah.
tattooing and art in general. So I think it's a really nice, and it's a really interesting thing to tie in with your tattooing. It works really well. I also wanted to talk to you a little while ago. I think I'm pretty sure it was when you was at Conspiracy, but you on your website, when people used to use websites, you had
I didn't have a website. I had a blog.
There you go. But you had I remember you had a list of projects that you wanted to like design ideas that you wanted to do. I was just wondering, was that for anything, or was it just something that the things that you wanted to do and didn't have a chance to do them?
It was really just like a thing that I was interested in. Like, how could I make a harpy, like the like mythological harpy creature, like make that into a back piece or something. Like it was those kind of topics, and yeah, like a lot of them actually got taken, and I had the chance to work on those.
Yeah, that's
and
so cool. I remember seeing that. Sorry, go on.
What's that?
Sorry, no, I thought you were going to say something, but I remember
No.
seeing that blog post and like almost feeling that was like the pinnacle of tattooing in terms of like, man, I hope one day I can just list like 10 things and then that's all I do for the year. That would be so cool.
It also was at the time, I feel like it's quite easy once you get recognition for your work for people to always just want that one thing.
Yes.
There was like a time where like, I mean, like to the day, I'm super excited to do any kind of bird as a tattoo. There's like a super fun design topic kind of thing. But there was like a time where all of a sudden I was just hammered with requests for magpies. And I love the bird, and it's like a really interesting one to do, but there is only so many ways you can make that translate onto a human body in a pleasant to the eye kind of way. And at some point, I just ran out of ideas.
Yeah, you end up drawing the same
So
shapes all the time.
pretty much. And like, I mean, like there is beauty in that, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna have 10 of those this month. I will definitely be able to pay my rent. But
Yeah.
on the other side, you kind of, I don't know, like you kind of lose the excitement about it because it's just like a repetition. So I don't know, like having those, you know, hinters of things that I was excited about then led into conversations with future customers about like, oh, I would like this, but can we like mix it with this design? Or like, so there was a lot of like back and forth. It was not like I was dictating how it's going to be. It was like, it was opening a dialogue between
just to let people know that you can do that stuff.
Yeah,
because I found that throughout you know, all stages of my career is when you post something, you know, suddenly a few weeks later or months later, however long you're booked for, suddenly you'll have 5 of the same thing in that week, and you're like, what? And it's because you've posted something on your Instagram and people just, I guess, like it, and then they're like, oh, he can do that thing, I want that thing. So from that I sort of found it important to post stuff that I want to do and like a variety of stuff, because I think people, you know, if they're not artistic in the way they think, their decision making is, I see that thing, I like that thing, that guy does that thing, rather than, I don't know, I want an obscure animal, Eckel could do a really good job of that, but because they haven't seen you do it, they don't kind of put it together. So I think, seeing those written there, I guess, was like, made people go, aha, okay, he can do other stuff that he hasn't sort of posted, which is, I think, is really interesting. With that, and following on from that, I spoke to, do you know Teresa Sharp? Yeah. She spoke about that she wanted to do like an art show, and she wanted to basically do, I think, 10 back pieces, just book her entire year just with these 10 back pieces, and then have like a live almost art show with the back pieces that she had done. And I feel like with the amount of back pieces you're doing in Vancouver, I think you could definitely do something like that, and I think you should.
I had a funny conversation with a customer of mine a little while ago. I mean, like at this point, I've definitely done a fair number of death-related back pieces, and it would be fun to at some point just, you know, like get together all these ladies and gentlemen and just go for, I don't know, like for a meal or something, and take a picture of all of them together. That would be super fun.
It would be so, because Steve Moore did something sort of similar to that, didn't he? Because he drew those the seasons. Rich has got one, Dan Fletcher's got one. I can't remember who else has got them, but yeah, it was like an art show on a body, which I thought was such an interesting idea. And I think you could definitely draw at least something like that where people could be like, oh, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, but she was saying she wanted to just tattoo those 10 back pieces for a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, it was actually on another podcast. It wasn't when she spoke to me, it was when I was kind of like researching before I spoke to her. Yeah, and she just said that it's been an idea that she's had just to, you know, 1 year, just say that this is all I want to do is 10 back pieces, and then just work on those 10 back pieces for that year, and then, you know, do like curate an art gallery, or, you know, well, you know what I mean, like just an art show with those 10 people. I don't know how it would work because, you know, no one's buying those pieces of artwork, but I think it'd just be a cool thing in tattooing, you know?
I mean, like similar stuff has been done before, like when Adrian Lee of back then New School Collective in San Jose, they were doing stuff like that, had like sort of like art shows where they showcased a lot of back pieces and whatnot. It's an interesting kind of idea, though, to basically put a year on hold to just work on those 10 clients. Like, let's say the idea of finishing each and every one of them within a year, it would be like after that year you would feel like, oh, I'm not hanging out with these people anymore that I've seen for an entire year, like every week.
Yeah.
That would
Well, I
be
mean,
such a weird kind of thing.
I don't know though, because I think what would probably happen is you would get really close to them, and I'd presume that they'd be, because I think the idea of it being 10 people is you tattoo obviously one each day for 2 weeks, and then by the time, or maybe more, I don't know, but by the time the first one you've done all of them, the first one is healed enough for you to start their second session.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be, you by the end of it you'd be friends with them, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that obviously they probably come from the town that you're tattooing in, so yeah, you would suddenly stop tattooing those people, but I'm sure you would then see each other afterwards because you'd probably become friends with them, I think.
It is a funny thing. Like I find, especially when it's a like a bit large project, like a back piece or a front piece or something, like it's like if you end up having a project like that with someone that you don't get along with, it's just not as fun. So you kind of like become a little bit more selective
Yeah.
about the kind of like person. And it's just like human nature. Like there's people that you just from the get-go jive with, and there's other people that there is like that connection is not there.
No.
Like it's a funny thing. Like I find when you have regulars, like you become friends with them
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
on a professional level. Like I know, like when I don't know, like Frank comes in to get work done, like I know what he's been up to, or like I'm catching up if he did that thing that he was talking about last time, and just like that's the beauty of it. That's what makes me exciting. It's not only that I'm working on a tattoo that I'm excited about, but I'm also getting to hang out with someone.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the many parts that makes it feel less like work.
Yeah.
It's not like
I agree.
when you're working in a street shop and it's just like names all day. And like there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't have that connection to the client. It's like it's someone, you get it done, you do a good job, and out the door they go.
Yeah, I think that's something that, and not that I didn't have this in the UK, but I really wanted to concentrate on that part of tattooing when I got to Canada, because when you have like a natural break, I guess, like a natural like new start, like you can assess how you do stuff and change things. And I think that like that was one thing I really wanted to concentrate on, is just having one person a day. And because I find that a lot of tattooers, they take the whole process kind of for granted, and which isn't, it's not their fault. It's just because you do something every day, you forget that to us it's just an everyday job, but to that person it might be like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it's something that they will remember forever. And I think it's really, really, and I've spoken about this before with people, but I think it's a really important aspect that a lot of people forget, is that this isn't just the tattoo they're walking away with. This is an experience. Yeah, and I find that, I've had I mean, as you know, I'm not going to talk about them here, but like I've had bad experiences with tattoos, and even though the tattoo is amazing and done perfectly, I don't like talking about that tattoo, and people will see that tattoo and go, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, and then just not really excited about it. And that is really sad to me, because your tattoo should be something that you're so proud of, and whether it's like helping you get over something or just something that's important to you, if you've suddenly got that negative feeling attached to it, it just ruins the whole experience. I think that's a really important, aspect of the tattoo industry that we forget. And yeah, I think especially with my new shop and that, I really want to push that side of it, and the taking care of the customer first. And, the whole experience is so important. Your go.
Yeah. My go. I think it's a two-way street, right? Like if your client is happy with the way you conduct your business, it will, like they give back at you or to you. And that's just like, that's the perfect scenario. And that's the other thing as well. Like, we alter people for the rest of their lives. Like, especially when you start doing bigger work, it's such a huge commitment. And you don't want to have any kind of negativity connected to that experience. And then, like, I'm definitely subscribing to that.
Yeah, for sure. Is it something that you're conscious of? I mean, obviously you're conscious of it before you tattoo someone, but because I know when obviously you tattooed Belle, my wife's back, and that's when we really kind of got to know each other properly, I think. And I know at that time you were only, the only way that people could get tattooed by you was if you knew them through someone, or it was kind of like you kind of had an idea of what they were before tattooing them. Is that something that you still do, or was I just mistaken in thinking that?
No, like, it's definitely something that I like. Like, obviously there's something about it that you can't control as much, because, like, like, there might be some kid sending you an email asking you about a super fun piece. And I mean, like, you have a conversation going on, like, at least with me, there is a lot of emailing beforehand. You have a conversation going on, you kind of like get an idea. But there is definitely something that I really appreciate about, like, knowing someone's partner who now wants to get tattooed as well. Like, you are in the know. You don't feel like you're jumping into cold water, essentially. That's the other thing as well, like, especially in this day and age where so many of us conduct their business through email beforehand. Like, you might end up having someone come through your door that is a complete asshole, and I don't want that. Like, I mean, again, like, there is a time and place for that. And there's like, just because I think that I don't get along with someone doesn't mean that, as I said earlier, like a complete asshole or something. It's just like, we might not connect well with each other.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that you don't, your personalities don't sort of mesh, and that, that's totally understandable.
As a side on that, I do think once you kind of like have an outline of what your work is like and the kind of people that pick you to do work for them, I would feel like I could throw two random clients of mine into a room and they get along. That's
funny how that. It's funny how, it's funny how, because I've noticed that as well. Like, and I don't know if it's the same with you. Like, my customers seem to age with me a little bit. I don't know. Like, I don't have too many customers that are like super young now. When I was like 18 or 19 and tattooing, all of my customers would be 18, 19, 20. And now all of my customers are a similar age to me, and it's kind of done that throughout the whole thing. And yeah, I find that, you kind of attract, even just by putting out artwork, you almost attract a similar type of person. I guess that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah.
Like, people just, I guess,
like,
relate
there's the
to
other
it.
thing as well. Like, there is something to be said about, like, what is like the peak age that people get tattooed. It's usually like something between 18 to early 40s, I would say. Like 18-year-olds, like, not a lot of them like jump in and getting a back piece done, let's face it, because there's, like, for the most of them, there is a financial barrier to that.
Sure,
and then a lot of people establish them career-wise in their like 20s, and if they're still having that like tattoo spark in them, they are more likely to commit to like a bigger project. And that's the thing, like, if you look at your career, you start out tattooing things, and like chances are they're about this big, which fits the financial ability of an 18-year-old well. And now you're doing bigger work on the regular, so there is something to be like, your work evolves and kind of like pulls the people with you, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. I just think it's an interesting thing that it's aside from the money and the size of the pieces and stuff, just like the types of people that are like interested in like your work and how what you're putting out, even if it's I don't know, just you're putting your like emotion, I guess, and you're like your thoughts actually into your work without even kind of realizing it, because obviously people are kind of picking that out and relating to it, and they have a similar, I don't know, maybe I'm talking rubbish, but I
No,
feel
like
that
that
that's
definitely
quite,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that kind of like leads on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And I think a lot of people, when we put out the thing to see what people wanted to talk about, it was like the design process. And we've made people wait nearly 2 hours to talk about it.
It is a funny one. Like I find, and it's kind of funny that we talked about this beforehand. You were asking me like, what kind of subject should we not touch? I'm like iPads. No, there's no like resentment of that at all. Like I'm just a terrible dinosaur, and my partner did let me try hers a couple of times, and I just can't get a grip of it. Like there's something about the surface that I don't like, and I'm quite set in my ways.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's not necessarily the iPad I was sort of getting at. I meant just in terms of like how you do research for your drawings, how like, because I mean this is how I do it, just to kind of give you an example. Someone will obviously give me a very vague idea, and then what I'll do is generally people will send me a picture of the area that I'm tattooing. So I do a quick like bubble sketch of how I kind of want stuff to look, and then I'll go and find reference pictures and kind of like loosely put them where I want them, and then just sketch over them until it kind of fits properly and like everything interlinking. And that's then when I start properly lining stuff and making stuff like pretty certain. And then after that, that's when I then do the final drawing. I think that's kind of what most people do.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that's what everyone wanted to know. So just wanted to maybe touch on that.
Let's say if I work on a sketch for a back piece, and it's let's say a lady and a deer, then you obviously would figure out like the placements for the main features of those two subjects on that tattoo or design. And the body gives you sort of like limitations on where you can put something that has to be very distinct, like a face. You can't put a face in a spot, like let's say, like that kind of like fold that a lot of people get just below the shoulder blades. You can't put a face there. Like even if the person at the time when they get tattooed is like slim and fit, maybe at some point in their lives they won't be.
Yeah.
So like you kind of want to avoid putting things in high traffic areas on the body, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah. Or, like, or just places that are susceptible to change.
It will change.
Yeah.
So there's that. Like that's my first kind of like process of like, where am I putting the features of each subject onto the placement given to me? Then hours of online and book research and like getting ideas of like, how can I render something in a way that is exciting to me and that makes sense, that will hold up over time. That's the other thing that is really important. Then kind of like getting my eggs in a basket, and it's basically, I find it's really important that you have to have an area in a tattoo or a design that is like really interesting to look at, but then you have to have something that is like sort of like a relief for your eye, which then in turn around for you doing it, you have like this like super techy area in the tattoo that you have to be hyper focused, and then you have like an area of black next to it this big, and you can just mow through that. And kind of like gives you that like mental break while you're still working. Like being like kind of like everybody that has ever done a figure's face as a tattoo, there's always that moment when you do like the eye and the eyes and the nose and those like features that someone who doesn't understand anything about tattoos can pick up and be like, oh, he fucked that up.
Yeah.
So you're super
Yeah.
focused on
Just important lines that need to be right.
And
Yeah.
quite straining, like mentally.
That bit of the tattoo where you're like, hang on a minute, I just got to concentrate for a second.
Totally. So you need to have those areas where you can just like do your job. Like there is a reason why so many people do the subject generic flower composition in a tattoo, because you have the flower that looks nice and like everybody will appreciate that, but it's also an area in a tattoo that is easier for you to do than doing something where you have to be like hyper focused to do this.
Yeah. That's
so
when,
I feel like
when you look at Steve Moore's tattoos, you're like, how is your brain works that way?
like he's in a different dimension. I do not understand. Like I definitely had a chance to look at a lot of his work, and like how he does it, I have no idea.
I know, man. That was at I think it was at that Winnipeg convention when I first saw one of his tattoos, and like obviously I've been following him forever, and you can't get a sense of how crazy his stuff is until you see it in real life. Because there's just little, like, I mean, every little detail is so well drawn and thought out. It blows my mind. One day we'll learn, Eckel.
One day.
Someone just said, did Steve Moore ask Eckel to do his back?
Yes, he did, and I chickened out.
No.
That's been quite a while ago.
What did he want?
It was a. I don't know if that's too personal.
Let's
not touch that.
It's all good. Well, is that something? So, but I guess you must tattoo a lot of tattooers, though. I know you tattoo a lot of tattooers. Is that an added pressure, or are you just used to that now?
The funniest thing, like when I think at some point there was a shift in my clientele where I started to tattoo more tattooers. I was super fucking nervous about it when that first happened, being like, oh my God, they can see every little mistake that I make. And I mean, like, let's face it, it's a handmade product that we do. There will be mistakes. It might be just like, I don't know, like a line that is not like 100% perfect because your client did a deep breath or like reached for their phone or something that kind of like created a little bit of movement, and you were like, and then I had a epiphany of understanding that all my tattooer clients have those same kind of things. And then at some point it was like, oh wait, this is fun, because not only does it mean that they are more forgiving of me fucking up,
I totally agree with you.
So I can chew their ear off about tattooing and tattoo related topics for the entire time that they're there. They're basically my prisoners for the time that they want to get tattooed.
I remember when you were tattooing my shin, there was one line where it's like right on my shin, and it just went, ah, and then we just like both looked at each other and we're like, that line's probably going to blow out. But yeah, I totally agree, because at first you're like, oh my God, they're going to see every mistake and they have such a high opinion of you and whatever. But then suddenly, you have that realization where they're like, well, we're all human, and we kind of get. And also, I think that, I don't know, those little mistakes are kind of make the tattoo what they are, and it just makes it human, you know. I think you once you realize that, you relax a lot, and I totally agree. I'm going to ask you one more question. It's getting on now. Let's think of a good one.
Yeah, it's been a while. Like, how long are we doing this?
We're getting up to an hour and a half, or 2 hours ish. Jeez,
look great.
I know.
Time sucker.
I'm sorry. I think the first ever tattoo I saw, and this is a rubbish question, but I'm just going to read it because it's on my sheet. The first tattoo I saw of yours was a blue lady.
Yeah.
which you have erased from the internet.
So there
Was that
was a
just a
time.
burnout, or was it just?
No, it was like there was an idea behind that. Like if you look at all like the old Japanese masters, like woodcutters, whenever they would do a ghost, it would be just like a bluish kind of figure.
Yeah.
And I thought there was something really neat about that at the time. That translated into me doing a lot of like ghostly kind of lady faces. And then, as we talked about earlier, there was a lot of people asking for that kind of stuff. And at some point, I just got tired of it.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed doing like regular skin colored pinups more than ghostly ones. That's really what it came down to. So I stopped doing that, and yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. It was just something that I found interesting, just because I remember you being so sort of well known for doing blue faces, and then suddenly it just felt like they just disappeared from the world. And it was because it was actually it was at London Convention before I got to work it, and I was outside, and then some guy had just had his hand tattooed by you, and it was a blue lady. And I was like, oh my God, so cool. And it was the first time that I saw one of your tattoos in real life. And I was like, ooh. But yeah, and then they disappeared off of the internet and, you know, into the world. But yeah, thanks for answering that question. I also wanted to give you an opportunity just to maybe, I don't know, give some advice to people if you want to, or just have like a last word before we go.
I feel like giving advice is such a specific kind of thing. Like that would be something that like I would have to have a conversation. Like there's not like generic advice that I can give aside from the obvious, like paint a lot, draw a lot, be busy, be humble.
But I think even though you say that's generic and obvious, like I think it's important still to say, because I don't think everyone knows that. I know it sounds silly to us, but you know, like people don't know that you have to really work hard to get anywhere. And obviously hearing it from you kind of backs that up a little bit. So I think that's still important.
I think there's also, like, I think generally speaking, having good bedside manners, so to speak, is a very important thing. Like I'm with another tattooer and getting her input, or like her and I talking about things like how male tattooers do things that are kind of funny or like uncomfortable or whatever, like that I would not necessarily think about in the first place. Definitely sharpens my mind to understand, like, oh, obviously I don't want to put anyone in a position of being uncomfortable while I'm tattooing. And I think that's an important kind of trait that we have to have in our industry.
I think making customers feel the most comfortable, because it's such a horrible experience. Well, not a horrible experience, but it's an uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable experience just right off the bat. So you know, doing the most you possibly can to make that person feel comfortable is absolute the minimum you can do, I think. Cool, man. Well, yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I know, you know, I'm pretty sure you've never done anything like this before, so I'm very
100%.
I'm very grateful that you let me drag you on here, and also want to say, like, just personally from me, thank you for, you know, being such a stand-up guy in the industry and someone that I've learned so much from, and you've always been really generous with your advice and everything. So thank you for that, and I truly mean that. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
All good, man. And we shall talk soon.
Okay.
Cool, man.
Bye, everybody.
See you later, dude. Bye.
See you later.